we often hear the word astronaut, but well, very often, again, it's used improperly. They are defined astronauts, people that are just passing the Karman line but are not really astronaut. And whoever better than a real astronaut to talk about this topic? Today we have the pleasure to talk with Roberto Vittori, an Italian astronaut who flew 3 times on the Space Shuttle and is a real astronaut, someone coming from the military. He has flown on 3 space missions, including 2 aboard the Russian Soyuz and 1 on NASA's Space Shuttle Endeavour. A decorated Air Force officer, Vittori has logged over 35 days in space, conducting research on the International Space Station. Also, I have to say, he contributing in building it.
There is so much to say about astronauts in my case. I have flown 3 times in space, twice on board of the Soyuz, 2002, 2005, and once on board of the Space Shuttle in 2011. In fact, was the second to last shuttle flight of the program. Was an incredible adventure. And yeah, my background is a pilot, test pilot, and that is where I'm coming from. That is my motivation. That is where I met some of my astronaut colleagues, astronauts with a capital A, that have made history in a human space flight. So I went through Patuxent River, that is a Navy test pilot school. So around the world, the best test pilot school are in the US. Specifically, there is one in California from the Air Force, Edwards. The other one is from the Navy in Maryland, Patuxent River. The question was, astronaut, why I am talking about test pilot school? Well, there is a reason. Space, human space flight started as a further expansion of the test pilot expertise. So, or the pilot expertise as a minimum. Yuri Gagarin was a pilot. Alan Shepard was also a pilot. Neil Armstrong was a test pilot. John Young was a test pilot from the Navy Test Pilot School. All astronauts that have made history are, one way or the other, coming from a piloting background or test pilot.
Well, he is making a straight and very defined difference between astronauts who come, most of them from the military, they are military test, experimental test pilots, and some people that just passed the Karman line. But do you know what's the Karman line? Well, the Karman line is an imaginary line, so it's not a real border like, something which is definitely in space, but you can imagine as an imaginary line like 100 kilometers from Earth's surface, which defines the limits between the aerospace and space, strictly defined. So the atmosphere and what's outside the atmosphere. So space by its definition. And you have to think about, let's say maybe you have followed the first flights of Starship. Well, the very first flights were not real space flights. They were not orbital flights. And also, most of the flights didn't even pass the Karman line. Also, when the Starship passed the Karman line, it was not really yet a spaceship, because it's passed the Karman line but didn't complete an orbital flight, so didn't complete an orbit around the Earth. So even though you are, as a person, maybe, if you're lucky enough, past the Karman line, you don't have the background, which is usually military background as experimental test pilots, of being really an astronaut. You're probably just a passenger.
Test pilot is very, very important, because in fact, all spaceships, Soyuz, Crew Dragon now, Starship, shuttle in the past, are experimental machines. So we commonly are very confused. We believe that flying to space is easy. We believe that is a given, especially in the current era, the space economy era, seems that it's a tourist attraction. That's wrong. That is completely wrong. Space is hard. Space is difficult. We cannot confuse the fact that we are capable to operate with enough safety and security to make it something easy. Space is not easy at all. Space will not be easy anytime soon. Space will never be a place for tourism for a number of reasons, not only for the safety, but also because space is very unfriendly. When you float in microgravity, you're a little bit adapting yourself from a three-dimensional, bidimensional human to multidimensional in the sense of your capability to move around. So flying in space is not easy. It's not a touristic attraction. In fact, I don't see a future for anyone that believes that spacecraft will be kind of a roller coaster for enjoyment of tourists. That will not be. So we know that space is for professional. We have seen that through the accidents, Challenger, Columbia, we have seen that unfortunately, anytime you explore a frontier, there are moments when things do not go as planned, and there are accidents. So that's what an astronaut is. That is what we are. And it is very important to clarify the difference between a pilot and a passenger. It's like when you go on a Boeing 777 from Rome to New York. Yes, there is the pilot, there is the commander, and then there are the passengers. That's a fact, and that will be the future also for space. It's normal. It's the normal evolution of it's the normal opening of the envelope. More and more people will be able to fly to space. That's the future. That's very important to be so. But still, we now have to understand who is who. So there will be the pilots, there will be astronaut pilots, the astronaut commanders, and the astronaut passengers. That's the way it will have to be. Currently, there is confusion. You use the same word to define everybody, and that creates a lot of confusion. For example, Axiom 3 or Axiom, the mission Axiom, those are tourist missions. So NASA is not permitting the crew to go on board without a babysitter. So each mission has a space babysitter. And the task of the space babysitter is to ensure that the tourists, the passengers, the visitors would not touch anything inappropriate or do any damage to the ISS. That is probably a little bit strange, but again, it's part of the future. The International Space Station, we started to build the International Space Station back in 1998. It was 26 years ago. And the International Space Station has been the most incredible success of modern engineering. It is almost unconceivable. Each one module is built in different part of the world, different technology, different culture. The first time they get together is in space, flying at 27,000 kilometers per hour. It's absolutely incredible. But in 2011, after the last shuttle flight, the station has been completed. So since then, station transitioned to a routine status. We can still do science, but at a certain point, the decision was to open it up to commercial opportunities, and that's where the confusion start to go in. You pay a ticket, 50, 70 million, you fly as a tourist to the International Space Station on this very special agreement under which NASA is permitting those tourists to stay a couple of weeks on board. At that point, they come back and call themselves astronauts. Okay, yes, in theory, that is probably proper, but it would be like landing from a 777 and having yourself called commander or pilot just because you flew as a passenger. It's we need to find new terminology. We need to find a new way to express the role of the next phase of exploration. And the space agency also can make mistakes. For example, one of the very significant confusion is currently in what in Cologne. In Cologne, there is the Center for the European Astronauts, and I don't recognize what they do. They now are hiring reserves. What is the concept of reserve?
So wait, maybe it's the first time that you hear about reserve astronaut or astronaut reserves. Well, it may seem a concept coming from the military. You have reserves, basically any country of the world military forces, but while there is a similarity in this concept, well, ESA reserve astronauts are a group of candidates, and yes, we have also talked with a couple of them, Mr. Nicola Winter and also Megan Christian, in a couple of written interviews on the SpaceInfo magazine, and they, as their reserve colleagues, are a group of candidates selected during the European Space Agency astronaut recruitment campaigns who meet all the qualifications to become astronauts but are not active part of the astronauts corps. Their activation might depend on mission needs, funding, and also international agreement.
It doesn't make any sense. An astronaut with the capital A should be somebody that is capable to explore the frontier. A professional astronaut has to be somebody that is excellent, that is first among peers. So the concept of reserve is a bit confusing and goes along with this other confusing concept that the paying passenger is called an astronaut. So those are all positive. Everything is positive. It's the future, it's the evolution, it's the next frontier. But we need now to go back to the basic and trying to understand who is the pilot with expertise, astronaut. What will make the difference for the future are the test astronauts, the astronauts capable to be test subject and test pilots. This will be very important for the next frontier. The next frontier will be the surface of the moon. So there will be a totally new choreography, a new domain. It will be very risky. So we have to have professionals capable to do what has been done in the past. So we have to reconstruct what it was back then, when there was Gagarin, then the Apollo program, then shuttle program. All those individuals were capable to do experimental work. The word experimental will regain a utmost important relevance. Ironically, Elon Musk liked very much the X, SpaceX. He changed Twitter in an X. X is not coming from Elon Musk. X is the symbol of the test pilots. So the X is for experimental, the X of experimental. The very first astronaut that flew twice in space flew on an X-15. What is an X-15? It's an aircraft made into a spacecraft. X-15, it was John Walker. John Walker in 1963 flew twice, one flight after the other, above the Karman line, and he has been the very first human to fly twice to space. So that's what is going to be the future. The future will be very similar. There will be, again, the need to have professionals, to have astronauts with a capital A that are completely different from the astronaut that like the opportunity of tourism. I, as a joke, if you look in my profile on LinkedIn, I have changed from astronaut to aeronaut.
Oh
with
yeah,
an
I've
S.
seen it. I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, the meaning of it is try to differentiate. Try to differentiate and to give the proper name to something that will be extremely important for the future. Starship. Starship, it's halfway between a capsule and a lifting body. Starship is a step closer to the shuttle. The shuttle has been the most beautiful and efficient machine to grant what? What is the key word? The key word is reusability. What is the reusability? When I am on my Boeing 777, I take off from Rome, I land in New York, I refuel and take off again. That is the reusability. Currently, spaceships are not reusable. And the Soyuz, you throw it away. Crew Dragon, it's not reusability, it's refurbishable. What is the difference? You
If
have to,
I, sorry, if I may interrupt you, maybe also the shuttle was refurbishable, not really reusable, or can we say that it was really reusable?
the shuttle was not reusable, the
Okay.
shuttle was refurbishable. Back in the 70s, the original concept was to have a fully reusable shuttle. They
Okay.
didn't make it. The shuttle ended up being refurbishable. Every flight, after every flight, they were flying it back to California,
Okay.
disassembled the entire machine, and it was extremely expensive, extremely complicated. And that is little similar to the reusability of the first stage of Falcon 9 or the future reusability of the Starship. So eventually, the space will be through reusable spacecraft, but we are not there yet. We will have to get to that point. For the moment, the closest that we get is in the refurbishable concept, the way was the shuttle and the way currently it is Falcon 9 and in the future Starship. In all this, and I close, yes, it is very important to see everything is positive, but we need to understand that if Italy, Europe, or wherever wants to have a role in exploring the frontier, first, they need to make the difference between professionals and tourists. Second, they have to go back to basics and understand that the current era of the International Space Station is misleading because you can take a fully automatic Crew Dragon, go to ISS and come back without being able to do anything. The future is on the surface of the moon, and the complexity will be much higher than when initially we start to build the ISS. So there is a lot to do, a lot of opportunities, and the astronauts with a capital A will be, again, very important.